I support all Ukrainian to have the right to vote in the US presidential election. And you can vote to send American boys from, Ohio, Minnesota, Colorado, California, Texas, New York, from all those US states to have them send their sons and daughters to fight in those Donetsk trenches you are in. Your fathers and sons and daughters and brothers are dying in those eastern frontier now, while the US college, students are wasting their time debating Black Lives Matters or, gender equality and all those things. How is that fair to you? So this guy named Charlie Kirk was shot and killed the day before yesterday. And to be absolutely honest with my audience, I don't even know who he is. I guess it is a shame on my part since I'm a geopolitical analyst and someone so famous who's also somewhat in the same alley as I. Um, and I don't even know him. He never really showed up on my radar. And it would be hypocritical for me to make a video mourning him and when I don't even know who he is. So I went on YouTube, searched for his channel, 4.2 million subscriber. I instantly recognized his face though, because YouTube did feed me a few of his YouTube shorts where he was roasting some college kids. Well, according to him, supposed to be debating those college students, which for a moment I thought it was like a Jerry Springer show college edition or something. For for entertainment purpose mainly, not for serious discussion. But then our dear President Donald Trump ordered to lower the flag for him for a few days. So I said to myself, all right, sounds like a very important person. Let's get to know him a little bit more, okay? So I watched his video on his channel for 3 hours straight yesterday. Here's my initial opinion, okay? First, I think his channel, his video, shown me the reason why my channel demographic looks like this, okay? I mean, look at it. It looked worse than the demographic of China. My biggest audience base is 65 years and older. 18 and 24 only account for 3.2%. I'm not sure, but I have other channel hosts watching my video. I bet my channel demographic look the worst compared to any of yours, okay? I bet Charlie Kirk's channel demographic is the polar opposite. I bet majority of his audience are under the age of 30. 90% of the topic he and his audience engage in are, in my opinion, unimportant, okay, irrelevant to many of the greater problems US and the world is facing today. I discussed this issue in an older video many months ago. There's a certain narrative that the United States, the US education system, and public media space intentionally amplify these unimportant matters to distract the public in order to pursue policy agendas that are destructive or harmful to both the United States and the world. It just doesn't want people to pay attention to them. So I can see why there's a conspiracy theory going around that both so-called Russian drone attack in Poland and also this Charlie Kirk assassination, both are maybe a tactic to distract the public from the Israeli attack in Qatar, channeling public attention away from this critical development in the Middle East, some kind of false flag operation to cover up other operations. But we're not going into the conspiracy theory here today. For the 10% topics he covers that I consider to be of dying importance, it's not just he's thinking. It's not just incorrect. It's shallow. It's skin deep. I have a lot of disagreement with my channel's audience on many issues, but at least I can follow some of their chain of logic and understand their reasoning. Charlie Kirk has no structural chain of thoughts on these issues, and again, not on the issues that matters to me or issues that should matter to all of you guys around the world. Second, the way he conducts those debates, it is very uncomfortable for me. I'm feeling like a slapping contest. I'm sure not all of his discussion debate went that way, but seems like the ones that do is also the reason that he's famous for. I could be wrong, okay? I only watched his video for 3-4 hours. But his action, in my opinion, may be doing more harm than good. It drives division even further, in my opinion. Or maybe I do not know the students thinking in college today. I graduated 20 years ago. Or maybe it was not his original intention or motivation, but that seems to be the result, in my opinion. I agree with him that the education system in the United States carries a lot of blame in this case. So today, in honor of Charlie Kirk's memory, maybe we should expand on some of his debate topic too, actually, okay? First one, what is a woman? Well, I think that is a woman, in my opinion, and also this one, and maybe that one as well. That looks like a woman to me. All right, next topic, immigrants and refugees. This is actually a very interesting topic. The movement of people. If you watch the debates that's going around the world right now on different social media channels from different parts of the world, it is often, not all the time, but often, it is people who has recently moved from one country to another, defending their position against people who was in the country to begin with, was born there maybe, and had a problem with new people arriving, correct? I'm first going to quickly go over the common narrative that's floating around in the public media space, both pro-immigration and pro-refugee against those that are, opposing. And then I'm going to provide an interesting alternative way of looking at the problem, one that I think it is rarely spoken, but I think it's very important for you guys to see it at a greater scale. So, for people who support the immigration refugee, the argument is usually the most sounding argument, at least on the surface to me, is that a sovereign country should have the right to dictate the immigration and refugee policy. Who should be let in, who shouldn't, and not let some global organization force terms onto your country, right? That being said, can we explore the problem a bit deeper? Let me tell you guys a story today, okay, regarding China, which I want my audience to use this story to reflect on the movement of people overall across countries and continents. China decided to open up its economy to the world during the late 1970s and early 1980s. Before that, the country is basically a super-sized North Korea. Initially, there were a lot of concerns regarding how to open up because the country's leader worried that if it was done incorrectly, it might cause instability. So the plan was to prioritize on the coastal cities first, to loosen the regulation in cities like Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, and Xiamen. If their transformation were successful, then the same strategy can be duplicated to inland cities. If the transformation went wrong, the government can then try to reverse the process without causing internal instability. So those coastal cities back then were like testing subject, guinea pigs, okay? However, the problems did eventually arrive. Even when those transformations were successful, foreign capital start landing in China in huge quantity, which are required to, purchase equipment and raw material. The government also started to aggressively expand the money supply to build infrastructures that is necessary to industrialize the economy and modernize the city. But as you can see here, China and the entire population of over a billion people are under one currency, right? The renminbi. So when you expand that money supply, whether it is through domestic money printing or credit issuing, or let's say accepting foreign currency and convert them into renminbi, it will have an inflationary impact on the commodity price. And as I explained it here, the development was focused on coastal cities. So when money supply expand, majority of the benefit of the money supply went to those places, not inland. And what you guys learn in economic classes here apply to China. Every new money issue dilute the existing money supply in circulation. The goal or the hope is that when those coastal city develops and industrialize, the benefit can then start to flow inland and benefit other places as well. But of course, there's a delay. You don't build a new factory and immediately recover your investment. So, what ended up happening is that the coastal cities started getting very rich and prosper, but the inland cities fell behind quickly. Wuhan, for example, the city I was born in, an inland city, we were the second biggest city in China in terms of GDP in the 1950s and 1960s. When China opened up, Wuhan continued to grow, yes, but at a pace much slower than coastal city, and our GDP dropped out of top 20 in just a decade. So I think during a period of at least 15 to 20 years, maybe even more, the standard of living in many inland cities didn't grow much at all, maybe even dropped because of inflation. From a macroeconomic perspective, you can say that the Chinese government sacrificed the inland city growth in favor of coastal city. So there were a lot of jokes going around in China at that time, which reflect the overall social issues driven by inequality between different regions in China. For example, let's say me and you, okay, we go to the same school and you are the better hardworking student. I'm the lazy disobedience one, okay? So after graduation, you get a very good, well paid job in the government. Uh, Me, however, no one wants me, so I abandoned or left my family and I traveled to the coastal city looking for job opportunity. But fortunate for me, I met the right person, got myself a nice export business running, and after 10, 15 years, I came back in a brand new Mercedes. While you, the good, hardworking student, still riding on that same old broken bicycle to work, getting paid what, 20, 30 US dollar per month, which was the salary back then. So, how will that make you feel? You will be pissed, right? So, if I want to open a new factory in our home city and you are running the government agency, you will be likely saying, hold on. I want the Mercedes too. You better give me some of those, ching ching if you want to get approval for the factory. In fact, I don't need to pay you a Mercedes. Compared to your salary, I would just give you some pocket change, and that will massively improve your standard of living. All right. In macroeconomic term, you call that the country is going through capitalization, because we used to run a socialist Soviet economic model, right? Just like the Warsaw states. However, in this chaotic era, who suffered the most? The farmer, the lower level peasants, right? Who were stuck with the land doing very low return works, earning pennies while everything become more expensive. And to make the situation worse for the peasants at that time in China, their identity was locked in a system called 户口. It's basically an internal passport system introduced in the 1950s. Every Chinese citizen was registered in a location, usually where their family is from. So it decides where you can get your education, your healthcare, and your housing, and also pension. And back then, there's barely any of those in rural areas, and you are not allowed to leave your village to go elsewhere unless the government permitted you to do so. I remember there was this joke or urban legend going around that the vice premier of China back then was visiting one of the poor village, to show that they care about the poor people, ask how they are doing, and there were camera rolling to record this visit, right? So the script was usually that the vice premier would be asking the people how you guys are doing. Do you need any things in particular, or maybe a TV or a new refrigerator? What the villagers reply was really funny. The villagers said that we need Chen Sheng Wu Guang. So Chen Sheng Wu Guang were the two leaders of the first recorded peasant uprising in Chinese history 2,200 years ago against the Qing dynasty. So what he mean was basically the two villagers were asking for guns and grenades so they can overthrow the Chinese government. That's how pissed off they were about their life. For people who are not familiar with the monetary issue I'm referring to here, it is similar to that movie. What is it called? The Facebook movie, where Mark Zuckerberg massively expand the share of the company and completely diluted his partner's share in the process.
He's wired in. Is he? Yes.
So as early as the 1970s, millions of rural migrants began to travel illegally. Remember, illegally, okay, to coastal cities to get a factory job, which pay quite handsomely compared to what they were earning off the farms. Yes, there were a lot of labor mistreatment and abuses, but still the economic incentive was high. The Chinese government couldn't really stop this movement. They do not have the resources to stop it. What are you going to do? Build Trump wall around those villages, or build a wall around major coastal cities and not let people in? That's not feasible, all right? And this is a very important point I want to make here in this video. If you think about it, it is inhumane to keep the people in their own village and out of the coastal cities, because you're basically robbing or sacrificing the quality of life in rural areas to benefit the coastal cities in order for China to modernize quicker. Every Chinese economist understood what it was. In fact, let me tell you something. According to the official laws and regulations, the movement started back in 1970s, okay, in China, when people started going from these rural places to urban places. State Council of China first allowed this movement in 1984, almost a decade after people are moving illegally. All right, the initial condition, was that the person who traveled to coastal city and towns, they need to be self-supporting. All right, government is not responsible for their food rationing or any welfare burdens. Okay, so if they starve, it's their problem. If they get sick, they have to take care of their own medical bill. There's absolutely no help from the government. And if the government agent found people sleeping on the street and not fitting into the society and get a job, the government would detain them and send them back to their home village just like what ICE is doing right now in the United States. This system was not abolished until 2003, so 20 years after. And throughout these years, a lot of public infrastructures that the Chinese government built was to accommodate this movement of people from inland town and cities to coastal area, including the famous railroad system China has today. That was the original incentive why they built all those infrastructures. So the people treated this way would be very pissed off and have the incentive to start, let's say, a rebellion and overthrow the government. But now, since you are allowing the people to move, then the government can tell the people, well, you think your life sucks? Go find a better job in Shanghai. It's not my fault that you are lazy and you are not willing to get out there to the coastal city to find a better job. So you see what the government did here. It migrated the pressure kind of back to the society, to the people. Now use this logic to think about the world, okay? Remember several episodes ago, I said that I wanted to interview George Soros and his Open Society Foundation. I want to understand he or whoever controls him, the Anglo-Saxons or the Jews or whatever narrative different audience of mine have. I want to understand how they envision the world function, how it works. From my perspective, and a lot of people agree with me, is that there are massive migration of people, often illegal, right? And that's moving from the global south to the global north right now. A lot of people say that, well, Chinese government is a ruthless dictator, right? Authoritarian. Well, as authoritarian goes, the government run by the Communist Party of China do not want the people to overthrow them, and they want to stay in power. So to keep those people immobile in their village, not allow them to travel, is both costly and destabilizing to the society, because the frustration and suffering might eventually snowball into a rebellion that can overthrow a government. In fact, the famous 1989 Tiananmen Square incident was driven by this economic imbalance. 1 year before that, if you guys check the record, in 1988, the inflation in major Chinese cities raised sharply by over 20%, in addition to all the inequality, corruption, and unemployment I was talking about. So by loosening the regulation, by allowing people to freely move to other cities to find jobs, it reduced the social tensions. Do you see what I'm getting at right now? Because the Chinese government policy, by forcing the entire country to stay in the one currency zone, and then expand the volume of the currency in one region and not the other, it created this imbalance and injustice, right? A byproduct of modernization. And you lock those people in their own village while doing that. So if I was, back then, you cannot blame me for getting extremely upset and maybe want to hold an uprising against the government. From my perspective, and a lot of people agree with me, is that there's massive migration of people, often illegal, that's moving from the global south to the global north right now. And it's driven by what? War, collapse of government, color revolution or not. It's not always driven by color revolution, okay? But to me, one of the driving force of this movement is these developed countries, mainly the G7, forcing their financial and monetary system onto the rest of the planet and expand that money supply in a way that focus on benefiting themselves and not the global south. Just like what the Chinese government did here, as I explained, with inland cities versus coastal cities. Of course, there's a difference here. Chinese government understand this problem very well, and they have for over a decade now focused development in inland cities and built massive infrastructure projects to help people move around and try to fit into the country as best as they can. So eventually, the Chinese government come back and compensate these inland cities and the people by modernizing these cities and making them richer as well. I know many of you want to speak your thoughts here, but let's stay neutral here because I'm not done making my points yet. The Chinese government, the Communist Party of China, has three major tools to rule over the country. Its military, its control over the money supply, including expansion of the money and taxation, and also propaganda. It's more or less the same with every country in the world, more or less. A carrot, stick, and lies. A government body, a regime cannot survive long with just, I would say, military suppression and propaganda. It has to eventually show results to people that it is in their interest to follow their lead. And eventually, that leadership has to have the desire and the ability to lead the people to a better life. So, letting the people travel from one city to another, it just erased the tension in society. The government itself still need to manage the country with skill and efficiency and help its citizens to achieve higher standard of living. Here's the main point of this video, okay? It's the United States. It's oligarchy elites or deep state or whatever fits your narrative. Are they trying to control the entire world just like the Communist Party of China trying to control the country? The United States use exact three instruments, as I stated here: military suppression, dominance over the planet, forcing everybody, every state in the dollar global monetary system, and also spend massive amount of money on propaganda. So the US, while pursued this goal of dominating the world, it faced the same set of problems Chinese government faced when it tried to manage and rule over its 1.4 billion people. If people are unsatisfied, do you, for example, the United States, can you spread enough propaganda to numb the people, to distract the people? Do you have a strong military to suppress any uprising? And can you fix the problem in the long run? So each of these so-called countries in the world that is forced into this US dollar denominated system, they feel that their country is actually getting somewhere, improving. And for people still argue that the United States did not force the world into the financial monetary system, I will argue that you have a very limited understanding of geopolitics. All these immigrations, illegal or not, and the refugees that are caused by all those Western-led regime change, color revolution operations, allowing these so-called people to freely travel to the global north, may be a humane solution. If the US ruling oligarchy insists on free movement of capital across the world, you also need to allow the free movement of people across the world to compensate for the unjust and uneven development, the uneven distribution of wealth of the world as well. So when President Donald Trump said to the public that he wants to be America first, while maintaining the US dollar as global reserve currency, those two are somewhat mutually exclusive objectives. It is like Xi Jinping, okay, going on national TV in China and say that, okay, the currency of China, the renminbi, I'm going to use it and pursue a Beijing first agenda. I don't care about Shanghai or Wuhan or Guangzhou or any other cities, okay? I don't care about any of them and those people. But you guys are not allowed to leave the renminbi system. You guys have to stay in the system. You guys are not allowed to use another currency like US dollar or Japanese yen. You have to stay within that renminbi currency circulation. And that's what President Trump's word means, which I think a few Chinese economists laugh, saying that it is the United States going from a neoliberal economic colonial world order back to a classical imperial colonial world order, basically. I mean, look at Trump's narrative and his agenda in the United States and what he also promotes in Europe. It's right-leaning agenda, correct? And semi-anti-immigrant and refugees. But then it's hypocritical to say to the global south that you are not allowing other countries to form an alternative currency or payment system. Everyone have to be in the dollar system. I'm going to punish you guys if you guys try to leave or establish some new system. If this is the case, and if that's successful, the world will end up in a scenario kind of similar to, what is that movie called? Hunger Game, yes, where you have different zone in the world, and it's kind of run by just one government, and people are not allowed to move from one zone to another freely or ever, and you just hold some sport games like Olympic or World Cup to numb and distract the public's senses. For example, if I'm from a country like Argentina, its economy sucks, the government is run by a bunch of elites that denominate all their wealth in US dollar. They have their kids going into US schools. The country is bankrupt, but I can beat you in a soccer match. I can win in a Hunger Game. So that's the world the US insists on pursuing. When you see all these people, okay, illegal immigrants, refugees being led into Europe and into the United States, you can feel like there's an invisible hand guiding this process. I think majority of the people in these developed countries do not want illegal immigrants and that many refugees, I would say, flooding into their countries, right? But someone is doing it. And today I am giving you an alternative explanation. Free capital flow requires free movement of people. And those in the world that dictate and control the supply of currency, and they are probably the hidden hand that promote this movement of people as well, at least to reduce short-term stress and tensions. In fact, you can further expand on this and say that the United States instrumentally orchestrated the regime change in Ukraine and many other regime change around the world, and the ongoing regime change in Venezuela. Then perhaps the people of Ukraine in this case, and I'm saying this to Ukrainian also who's watching this video, all right? I support all Ukrainian to have the right to vote in the US presidential election, because the United States has such a big responsibility in leading your country to where it is right now. It is only fair if you get to vote in the US election too. And you can vote to send American boys from, Ohio, Minnesota, Colorado, California, Texas, New York, from all those US states, to have them send their sons and daughters to fight in those Donetsk trenches you are in. Your fathers and sons and daughters and brothers are dying in those eastern frontier now, while the US college, students are wasting their time debating Black Lives Matters or, gender equality and all those things. How is that fair to you? They need to bear the cost of your country's destruction. Only by understanding that cost, losing hundreds and thousands or millions of American lives to conventional weaponry or nuclear weapons, only then they can understand the consequences of their decision, if they believe they're in a democracy, right? Your votes as Ukrainian can help to bring their kids to your front line to fight with you. This will help you against, Russia, and it will also help Americans to think harder about their democracy. Are they in a real democracy or not? The choice they make bear consequences. That's what choice is about at the end. It's not about right or wrong. It's about decision and consequences. This is what some of the greater minds in China is calculating at the moment. The US empire is running into a bit of trouble. If its propaganda department is failing, people starting to wake up to reality. If the monetary system is also failing, American standard of living is failing, and the allies and colonies of America, their faith in the US system is collapsing, what is left? Is it not the final card, military? If the United States is not willing to gamble its military strength to hold on to its supremacy, then what other tools are left to rescue and, try to reverse the decaying states? People say, oh, look at China, let's say Tiananmen Square. Look at those tanks rolling over the students. How horrible, right? My raw, unhinged comment of that is, well, if the Chinese government do not have the wisdom or the determination to turn things around, to fix those problems, those students will be on the streets every other month for years until the government is overthrown and the country disintegrated, maybe. Perhaps we are now at the Tiananmen Square moment in America. Tons of domestic, political, and social violence, inequality, and the US global order is also having a little bit of problems, and countries are seeking alternative alliance and paths. The series of events unfolding recently in US foreign policy, you can imagine it is US government sending, tanks out there to suppress the population. This is some kind of similarity there, all right? But at the end, like what I said, you can't just run and control a country or empire just by using sticks and lies. Military and propaganda has its limit, okay? The US need to find ways to improve people's life in order to hold on to this empire. If not, at least hold on to its own country. Something to think about, isn't it? Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe to my channel. See you guys in the next video.